and I'm pleased to lead the discussion here today. We'll explore network sunsets and how to manage the transition from legacy 2G, 3G technologies to the latest LTE, Cat-M1, and NB-IoT network offerings. Obviously, cellular technology keeps evolving. Legacy networks become outdated and much more expensive to operate. Some carriers have already sunset their 3G networks. Some have just sunset their 3G activations, not allowing new 3G only devices to be activated on those networks, but the network is still there. However, all of them have been reducing service availability for GSM, CDMA, and 3G networks throughout the U.S. So the question is why? Why now? For carriers in the U.S., they really have no choice. The industry is forcing MNOs to catch up to the needs of the market. And we'll go into specifics here in a second within our Q&A session. But for application service providers, a network sunset means challenges. In the short term, of course, they'll be pressed to transition fully to LTE technologies before those legacy services are disrupted. But this transition will enable ASPs to run their devices on more efficient networks, of course, over the long term without facing this looming technology sunset, allowing their deployment hardware to have a longer life to them. So I'm joined today by Jeff Smith, Regional Sales Manager, and Joe Farney, who's our Regional Sales Specialist from Tellet's Connectivity Division. Hello, guys. And
good morning, Brian.
We're going to have a quick session on this topic. So let's really dive right in. The first question is why? Let's spend some time on talking about why the carriers in the U.S. specifically are shutting down their 2G, 3G networks. And let's start with you, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Great introduction. And in North America, we're really spectrum limited. So what does that mean? The main network operators and the carriers here in North America, mostly domestically here in the United States, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, are very focused on sunsetting their respective 3G and 2G networks. When we talk about sunsetting, we're talking about the turning off of that respective network technology. Carriers are sunsetting, to Brian's earlier point, these older technologies to make room and spectrum for 4G LTE, to grow that network and infrastructure, and also to roll out the 5G across here in the United States. One important thing to remember that I want to highlight is that the voice service on LTE and 5G is dramatically different and fundamentally different than that of 3G, right? So when we talk about 3G voice, we talk about older devices that support that legacy infrastructure. So any device that you're going to retrofit in the IoT application that you might have deployed in the field, this goes into MPERS, mobile personal health, healthcare verticals. You really need to make sure that your new device supports voice over LTE, also known as VoLTE. So, that's the real reason why we're, seeing these network migrations and these timelines are approaching us today.
Yeah, great points, Joe. And it's really, the bandwidth of the networks. The MNOs really need to add additional bandwidth to apply to the new technologies, the new modules, the new devices that are coming on out right now. And the older technology just doesn't support that. The older infrastructure doesn't support that. So as Brian said earlier, this industry, this ecosystem is ever evolving. And as it evolves, it needs to evolve to the newer, faster, bigger technology.
Yeah, limited spectrum.
Yes.
And maybe throughout the rest of the world, they're not having those challenges, but certainly here in the U.S., it's all about spectrum. So then the next question is, what are the current dates of the planned sunsets? And we can kind of talk through the different carriers, but, how do the sunsets differ geographically? And are sunsets happening at the same rate globally, which we know are not happening that, as fast as it is in the U.S. So Jeff, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. Great question. And I'd like to say, hope everybody out there is doing well and safe and enjoying the working from home now, the new. Regarding the dates of the planned sunsets from the different carriers, this is really a moving target. They change frequently, and so the dates and the information that we have today may be different next week or next month. It's really up to the carriers on how efficient they are during their sunset process. Are they running into any hurdles? Are they running into any delays? Those are the things that are going to affect these dates. Now, the dates that I'm going to go on over here are domestic dates, domestic carriers. They're not global. These will be up on the Telit website, so they will be updated anytime there's a change. And please go to the Telit website for the most up-to-date information. So starting off with AT&T, their 3G. Right now, they've tentatively pegged February 2022. So it's 02/2 of 22 is kind of the easy way to try to remember that. Sprint, they've got a 2G and a 3G sunset date. The 2G is tentatively scheduled for December of 2021. The 3G is tentatively scheduled right now for December of 2022. Moving on to T-Mobile, we've got 2G that is tentatively scheduled for December of 2022. T-Mobile tentatively scheduled for October of 2021.
For their
Moving
3G
on
network.
for the
Right.
3G network, yes, thank you.
Right.
And then Verizon's 3G network tentatively is scheduled for October 2021. Now, these are end dates. These are not dates that the sunset is going to start. These are the dates that the sunset will end. So prior to these dates, these carriers will be geographically going through shutdown efforts, okay? Customers may experience network issues on the different carriers as the carriers start to sunset 3G
Right.
bandwidth. This will vary from carrier to carrier as each carrier has their own plans and their own way of doing the sunset. This information is not always known in advance as the areas around the country lose 3G spectrum. It may be that spectrum is just parsed down where they cut a band out where they still allow 3G spectrum. It may be certain areas of the country when they shut down that 3G spectrum, it's off completely. So
Yeah.
customers may wake up the next morning and not have a device there.
Yeah, and what's
Each
interesting about
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say each carrier is going to migrate to LTE differently in shutting that down, whether it's one
Yeah.
band at a time or final, cutting it off. So
Yeah.
your best plan during this is to be proactive on getting on out as soon as you can to shut down your existing deployment. Work with Telit to get your LTE up and going.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention, think about T-Mobile 2G actually getting sunsetted much later than T-Mobile 3G, and thinking why would they shut down 2G later? And the reason is just T-Mobile actually has more deployed devices on that network today than their 3G network. Their 3G network was only around for a short period of time before their LTE network started to gain traction. So they're going to shut down 3G first and let millions of 2G devices have another year before they end up sunsetting. And these are all great answers here. So then I want to go to another question, which are what are the steps in creating a migration plan? You have a deployment of 2G, 3G devices, and you want to migrate them to the latest technology. What's your plan? So Joe, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a very important topic and question that we often hear from the market, our customers out there in the field that are experiencing these challenges, right, with network sunsets. So one of the top challenges we hear from customers is having to manage and migrate the sunset and build a plan, right? So we often get asked, how do we develop a plan? How do we create a migration strategy? And it can seem like a daunting task, right? I mean, but you got to start with a solid foundation, just like anything in business, anything from a strategy perspective. You got to develop your partners. You got to develop your project management team. And these plans should be a working document that should always include your key timelines and those milestones that Jeff just put out there from the network sunset dates. So the first step is to understand how many devices do you currently have in the field with that respective 2G or 3G technology deployed. This is an important number to identify. Why? Because you have to work backwards from this number. So if I have 10,000 devices, I need to identify how many devices I need to touch, how many devices I need to redeploy, or how many new devices I need to build with my hardware, my SIM infrastructure, et cetera. So we also talked about identify your strategic partners, right? The hardware space, the engineering space, the connectivity space, but internally, who are your stakeholders within your organization from an operations side that are all going to have to take part in this migration strategy and planning? Identify and make sure your plan has the identifiable timelines and to work from. We mentioned that earlier, but really make sure you are staying up to date on the key milestones. These dates can change. It's very fluid. We've seen them push before in the past when networks have been sunsetted. So please stay up to date. Jeff mentioned check the Telit website, check with the carriers, check with your connectivity partners to make sure that you have that exact date because it is a moving target and it will change. But really the last point I want to make is understanding the cost, what it's going to cost you, your business, your organization to migrate from 2G and 3G to LTE or 5G. And some of those costs you really want to take into account when building your plan and your strategy is what's the cost of your new hardware? What's the cost of any design, engineering, or certifications? What is the timeline it's going to take you to enter the certification process to get certified so you can deploy that device, right? What is it going to cost you from an operations side? Are you going to have to roll trucks in the field? Are you going to have labor or manpower to change out the devices and deploy that new hardware? And then most importantly, what's the cost of your new SIM, your new infrastructure, and your connectivity and data plans? But lastly, do you have any redesign costs on the cloud side, the storage piece, or your data analytics side as well too?
Yeah, those are all really good points. And I think of companies that have products that typically come back. They have a short life cycle, and so they're able to replace technology pretty quickly, where other companies have deployed products that are supposed to be a fixed asset that stay out there for an extended period of time. And so that truck roll is really important to factor into how do I upgrade my technology to the to the latest. So all really good points. Thanks, Joe. And I think the next question is, will ASPs experience issues with the network during these transitions? And I think we mentioned it a little bit, but, how is this really going to impact their installed base? So Jeff, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, Brian and Joe, to dovetail off of what you just said, will an ASP have any issues? Really, that's going to be predetermined by the plan that the ASP comes up with. How proactive is that company in going on out and identifying their 3G deployment base, putting their plan in place of what they're going to do to migrate from 3G to LTE, and being able to get that impacted in a period of time that gives them enough leeway before that sunset date. Okay, if they start running too far into the end of the sunset time, they could wind up experiencing network issues where they have products that shut off. They wake up one morning and their customers aren't able to connect. And that's going to be a surprise to people if they aren't available with new product and have that plan in place to proactively go on out and do that. So tying back into what Joe said, it's really proactive planning. Work with your Telit partners, work with your carrier partners, try to be up to date on all the changes that are happening, and geographically see if there's any information available at that time so you can come up with a strategy of where you are going to deploy your truck rolls and bandwidth and new products first, if those areas are going to be the first ones that the carriers are going to start to sunset.
Yeah, those are good points. And I think it just kind of leads to our last question, which is, what are the options available out there? What are the options for businesses? If 2G and 3G is being sunset, there are plenty of variants of LTE that customers can choose. So there are a lot of options. So Joe, why don't you walk us through a few of the options that are available today for ASPs looking to jump on the latest technology?
Absolutely. And this is a very important piece as we talk about the migration from a 2G and 3G infrastructure, because it's not just as simple as a pure rip and replace with one technology. As we evolve in the network evolution of cellular IoT connectivity, especially, we now have different flavors to what Brian mentioned. You can go from 3G to LTE, but what does that look like, right? So number one, your option could be a pure replacement of 3G with LTE Category 1. Now, what is LTE Category 1? It's potentially the lowest cost LTE category that still has sufficient speeds, and is a little bit lower from a megabytes down and up than your LTE Category 4 and higher. So with LTE 1, it's ideal for a vast number of applications. You can use video support still on this and voice support still on LTE Category 1, but you're going to look at about 10 megabytes down and about 5 megabytes up for your speeds. Now, you do have a low power option for option number 2, which is LTE Category M1. Now, what this helps reduce is your power consumption, extend your device's battery life, and gives you a little bit more value and a lower cost of entry into the LTE market than your traditional LTE Category 1 or LTE Category 4 and above. So the third option that you potentially have when migrating from 2G, 3G to LTE is the Category 4, which I mentioned earlier. Now, these data speeds are for more bandwidth-rich, intensive applications. LTE Category 4 gives you speeds up to 150 megabytes per second down. Now, this is the second evolution of the LTE network, often known as advanced LTE, but it gives you the opportunity to deploy mobile routers, LTE routers, video streaming, feature-rich, high bandwidth intensive applications. You're going to want to go into the LTE Category 4 and above space. Now, the last option, which is a little bit newer and a very big buzzword right now with the migration strategies, NB-IoT, narrowband IoT infrastructure. So what this is, it gives you the availability to really deploy a low-cost hardware option with very minimal bandwidth requirements. So what speeds do you see with NB-IoT? You can see download speeds up to about 250 kilobytes per second, but we see it more in the 50 to 60 kilobyte range, right? So if you have peak data speeds that are lower than those thresholds, this gives you a low-cost entry into the market and an availability to really conserve battery life and really, deploy for fixed assets in the market.
Those are good points. And Jeff, what do you think about how Telit is addressing these network sunsets and helping companies transition to the latest technology?
Sure. Well, Telit is unique where we're able to support on both the connectivity side and the hardware side.
Right.
And so we are working with our customers on helping them to identify what their install base, as Joe had talked about earlier. What is their exposure to the 3G devices that they have on out there? How can Telit help them build, certify, and get ready a new LTE product to deploy? Working with customers on what the appropriate data plans and data profiles are of the new LTE devices that they are going to deploy, making sure that those contracts are in place, and then really being the trusted partner of helping them have the connectivity, have the partnership of Telit as a one-stop shop to go on out and proactively migrate from 3G to LTE so that they can get their devices changed on out before they have any sunset issues of devices going dead out in the field.
Yeah, that's a good point. Cat M1, NB-IoT, 5G networks, they're all here. And as the new arrives, the old goes out. So wireless sunsets may involve hard work and investments in the short term, but over time they more than pay off in increased functionality, of course, and the new opportunities that come with network sunrises, we'll call them. So when you're ready to transition to the new technologies, Telit can help. We can help create your migration plan and future-proof your deployments. We have modules, we have connectivity, we have device management software. Telit is the enablement company for products out in the market today. So we're here to help ASPs to deploy a product and maintain a successful product in the market. So I think this was a really good discussion. I appreciate your time, guys. I think hopefully some folks got some good information out of this. So thanks to Joe and Jeff for their time this morning, and thanks you all for attending.
Yeah, Brian, thank you. Joe, thank you. And anybody that has any questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of us or go to the Telit website for any information.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.